So Andy Parker, I lead our corporate finance team at Cooper Parry, and I'm here because we've been asked a lot of questions by our clients over the last 2 or 3 weeks about what they're going to be doing for cash flow, what the banks are doing to support them through the CBILS loan scheme. So we're here to sort of chat through a few things that they might want to think about.
Hi everyone, this is Ben Rookes here. I'm a colleague of Andy's, a partner in the corporate finance team. We'll be as helpful as we can to you in terms of the new government support that's out there for businesses. They are trying to do a lot, and hopefully we can give some clarity around some of that for you. I guess first and foremost though, a lot of people are asking who should they turn to as a sounding board, who can help them in the current environment. Any thoughts around that?
Well, I guess, look, there's a number of places people can go. Some trusted advisors will be well connected. The banks are well connected, but the banks are incredibly busy at the moment trying to deal with processing a lot of the information. I think probably the best place to start is perhaps with your accountants, with your auditors, with your accountants, the person that you'd normally turn to.
What are the things that business owners could be thinking about to, I guess, strengthen their cash flows, alleviate some of the pressures? What are you seeing from kind of your clients? What are they doing?
Well, again, there's quite a number of things that I think people can do. In the short term, they've got to really understand where their challenges are and what they're going to be over the next few months. But there's some simple steps. If there are people where their job is no longer there for the time being, they can furlough them. They can look at deferring VAT, look at deferring corporation tax, look at, have they been claiming R&D? If not, should they have been? Can they get access to some free cash that way? So go through their cash flow, work out what they need to spend, and really put a focus on their cash flow management.
I think one of the biggest things as well that we often see with businesses is that working capital kind of piece and the management around that. Have they done everything they can with their existing kind of business? So their debtors, have they got the cash in from those that are outstanding? Are there any credit terms that they can maybe just push a little bit? Obviously not trying to put anyone else under financial pressure, but is there the opportunity to just flex things a little bit to alleviate some cash flow pressure?
Definitely, all of those things they should be thinking about.
Yeah, stock as well, I guess, for a lot of businesses is very relevant. So can they look to kind of destock a little bit? Have they got too much stock? Do they need to buy any more in? All of those types of questions can be asked.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. What are the headlines in terms of who can apply for this?
Well, it's got to be a UK business. Businesses up to 45 million, although there is a separate scheme for larger businesses, but up to 45 million turnover. Let's define it as a borrowing proposal which the lender would consider viable. So what does that mean? Well, it has to be sensible. It has to be something that the business would be able to sustain in the longer term, but it's been precipitated, I guess, by the COVID-19 crisis that's impacted. So it's got to be a good business, it's got to be a sound business. But if there are short-term cash flows that are problems that are created by this, then this sort of the CBILS loan scheme, CBIL as it's being known, is what's there for them.
One of the important criteria that has been looked to be kind of flexed a little bit is that size. So at the moment, the CBILS criteria is based on up to 45 million turnover, but the government have announced that towards the end of the month, a new scheme will open for those larger businesses in the 45 to 500 million bracket. So all of which will be welcome. What are the kind of key features of the scheme for those businesses? What are they getting access to?
Well, what the scheme does, it means you can get loans of up to £5 million. The security for those is effectively the bank is taking security from the government. They're guaranteeing up to 80% of that loan, which makes a massive difference to their ability to lend. You'll be looking at a repayment term of up to 6 years. And in that first year, there can be a deferral of some of the interest that's being incurred. So actually preserving that cash in that first year whilst the COVID-19 crisis is affecting the business.
Yeah, and clearly very attractive that first 12 months kind of interest-free and kind of arrangement-free, all designed to kind of alleviate cash in the short term. I think that is definitely kind of one of the key features. And in terms of types of finance available, what are you seeing from your kind of clients? What are they applying for?
Yeah, I suppose it's a mixture. It can be a loan, just a simple loan that's repayable over the 5-6 years, whatever that sort of right period is. It might be something that's asset-based lending, so invoice discount, that sort of feature. It can be very flexible. It can be an overdraft or a revolving capital facility. It just depends on what the requirements are of the business. And this is one of the things I think is really, really important, that before the businesses apply for those loans, they do think through what is the right mechanism, the right structure of that loan that works for the business and the situation that it finds itself in.
And where should people go to? How do they go about applying for it?
The best way is through your current bank. There's about 40 banks that have signed up to the scheme. That includes all of the clearing banks, a lot of the challenger banks as well. But that is a first port of call for your initial conversation.
The stats were something like they've granted about 4,200 of these loans to date so far. So clearly a lot more to do, but there've been about 4,200 successful applications, and I think the stat was about 800 million gone out the door. So it's tip of the iceberg, but I guess we've got to start somewhere.
And look, this is going to take a little bit of time. The banks have to assess the viability of those loans. So there are borrowing criteria that need to be assessed. You can't just give money to a business that's going to fall over regardless of the coronavirus situation that's been put in place. So the banks have to do their work, and that does take time, I'm afraid. But when I talk to the bankers, they are working exceptionally hard to try and get these through.
Yeah. And I think some of the conversations that we're having with banks to do with our wider transactions as well, that they pretty much, they're focusing totally on their existing portfolio and those, I guess, kind of government applications. So there isn't lots of new business coming in, is what we're hearing on the ground. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think they've redeployed people to really look to try and just get on with dealing with these applications that are coming in. So they've taken a big step on the behalf of the banks. So I think people are going to get frustrated because it's always frustrating. Things take time. One of the things I will say, and I do say to our clients, is make sure you're prepared. Have you thought through what you need? Have you stress tested your forecast? Have you thought about what might happen if X, Y, or Z happens? Have you looked at all the little cash flow measures you might be taking in there? Have you got a business plan that supports it, not just for the 3 or 6 months, but beyond that? So what often happens in a downturn is companies are usually okay. If the working capital tends to unwind in their favor as you go into a crisis, but as you come out, as you start growing, then that's when you start to eat up working capital. So it's not just think about today, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, but also what happens as you come out of the crisis, and putting all those thoughts together into a proper comprehensive plan, maybe looking at a best case, worst case, and disaster scenario for your cash flows and your business plan that you put to your bank. That's probably a good place to be.
What should kind of business owners expect to be presenting when they're applying for these loan applications from from banks. I guess that varies from bank to bank in terms of what they might ask for, but what would you see as kind of the typical bits?
I think most of the things are going to be standard, pretty much standard for most people. They're going to need to see your last accounts, your management accounts, your cash flow forecast that you've really thought through and checked and kicked around and just checked that works. And then that business plan, what is the future plan for the business? How are you going to repay this? If you're taking a loan out over 6 years, what's your repayment plan likely to be? So you do have to put some thought into it and help the banks. One of the messages that I've found from many years of doing corporate finance deals is if you make their life easy for them, it's much easier for them to give you a loan or an investment. And I think that's absolutely the case today, probably more than ever.
I guess one of the concerns, and I've heard a few kind of horror stories kind of on the news, is around kind of people giving security around some of these loans. Do you know what the actual position is regarding kind of personal guarantees in particular on this?
Yeah, so if there is security that's unencumbered in the business, then that has to be given as part of the security. And I think that beyond that, so the guarantee is for beyond the current security that's available within the business.
I think they tried to put a number around that as well from some of my reading. So around about $250,000. So for facilities of below $250,000, absolutely no personal guarantees in place.
Absolutely no personal guarantees, and frankly, for larger businesses, I'd always recommend you try your best to avoid giving personal guarantees if you're a larger business anyway.
For kind of absolute clarity, for the smaller applications, so those below kind of 250,000, the government stated that there'll be no personal guarantees kind of whatsoever. For the larger amounts above 250, I think it's at the bank's discretion, and clearly if there's security there, like all banks would, they will look at that. But what has been made clear, even for the larger amounts, is that someone's kind of primary home cannot be used as a guarantee. So they may look at other things, but for absolute clarity, people's homes are not being asked to be put up for this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess one of the questions I would be asking of my current bank, though, is why have they turned it down? Is there information that I've not been able to provide for them? Is there something in the business plan which says that there's a problem? Do I need to rethink it? Do I maybe need an equity investor instead of a bank? Because my ability to pay the cash flow in the short term or medium term is not going to be there. There's lots of questions that you probably need to ask yourself if your incumbent bank is turning the loan down.
And I guess something that a lot of our clients are asking, how can we help them in these current unprecedented times?
Well, I've had a number of conversations with clients, and it can be from very simple sort of discussion around, have you thought about deferring your VAT and your corporation tax? Have you thought about claiming your R&D credits? Have you thought about furloughing some people that are not required in the business at the moment? So it can be some of those simple things through to actually, do you need any help putting your business plan together? Do you need any help sort of doing a bit of a stress test on your cash flow forecast before the bank does? Do you need an introduction to a bank? Do you need to think about equity as another solution? So it really has gone through the range of different sort of different views and different questions that have been coming up. So to summarize for me, this crisis is really a crisis of cash in the short term, and it's how to make the business survive until it can get back to its normal trading conditions. So what's the sort of things that you need to think about? Well, one is, what can I do? What levers can I pull in my business to preserve cash? We've talked about working capital, we've talked about tax savings, we've talked about cash flow management through repayment of loans and so on. What can I do to pull those levers? Secondly is preparation. The banks want to help, but they'd love you to help them first. So do your preparation, make sure you've got all the information that you need, and make sure you're presenting it in a way that makes it easy for them. And thirdly, make sure you're talking to an advisor who can help.
I hope that's given everyone a little bit of insight into the coronavirus government-backed business interruption scheme. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We'd love to help you.